Hello all, Rick here. The Dominion War is a popular topic among Trek fans for the light it cast the Federation in, the juxtaposition to how we had previously seen the organisation and its struggle to retain its core values. The exploits were thoroughly documented in Deep Space Nine. Voyager skipped over the event, so one question remains unanswered in canon: what did the Enterprise get up to during the war? As I am answering a question that was not addressed on screen, this means that we will be turning to the old friend of Apocrypha to fill in the gaps. So, of course, none of this is canon, but it is official content, so you can interpret this how you see fit. The USS Enterprise, NCC 1701E, was launched in 2372 as one of the first batch of new Sovereign-class vessels, which had begun development in 2365 as part of Starfleet's hastened attempt to modernise its fleet in the face of the Borg threat, with the Battle of Wolf 359 a year later radically altering their plans. The USS Sovereign was launched in 2370–71 as the prototype, and the second vessel to launch of that line was christened the USS Enterprise in honour of the recently lost Enterprise D over Viridian 3. This was launched in 2372, just before the Dominion War broke out, but during the build-up of tensions with them and the brief Klingon War that was part of their machinations, so it would have been active by the time of the Dominion War. We know for certain that the Enterprise was assigned to patrol the neutral zone during 2373, and by this stage the vessel had only just completed its shakedowns and entered into active service proper, a process that took almost a whole year. So it practically sat out the build-up of the Dominion War, while its systems were thoroughly checked and tested. It was tasked with attending diplomatic brushfires and other such diplomatic duties, but its first major combat response was to engage the Borg at the Battle of Sector 001, as we saw in First Contact. Although a harrowing experience, it was a successful demonstration of the Sovereign's capabilities, and clearly it held its own in combat. So the questions are, why did we not hear of the Enterprise at all during the Dominion War, and what was it up to instead? The real-world answer is simply that DS9 did not want to add the Enterprise to its show in any way and divert attention from its own storyline, so its inclusion was never a priority. But it's the in-universe lore I care about more, so what gives? Well, firstly, the Enterprise E was a brand new vessel and a replacement for one that had been lost after only 7 years of service, a Galaxy class that at the time was also the pride of Starfleet. Any ship to bear the name Enterprise was granted status as the unofficial flagship of the Federation, and its actions watched with close scrutiny. Such a vessel, although advanced, would have made a tempting target for any adversary in battle, and its presence in any theatre of war would have likely escalated the situation, especially if the vessel was actually targeted by the Jem'Hadar. We've already seen that the Dominion knew how to wage a war of morale alongside its tactical might, and I do not think it unlikely that an entire Dominion wing would be sacrificed if it took down the Enterprise. The damage it would do to Starfleet morale, to see their poster vessel fall, would be severe, as the exploits of the legendary ship are advertised all over the Federation. Plus, there is the simple matter of resources. The Sovereign class was brand new and a top-of-the-line vessel, and while the Federation does not use money, it's still a major investment of time and materials to construct one. Throwing one into a fireflight is risky, especially if it already has a name that says "Please shoot me." So instead the vessel was assigned to related issues around the war, but generally kept away from combat-heavy zones. In 2373, the Enterprise did stumble across Section 31 as part of its duties when it went to CHIAROS 4 to prevent a potential Romulan incursion. However, in 2374, the Romulan Star Empire was brought into the conflict through the machinations of the episode In the Pale Moonlight, and suddenly the Dominion had to contend with a new adversary. This did mean that the neutral zone that the Enterprise had been assigned to would no longer be removed from the front lines. It is during this time that the Enterprise was assigned to Gorn, capital planet of the Gorn hegemony, to seek out an alliance with them and build diplomatic ties with potential allies. However, this did not work out, as negotiations with the Gorn fell apart when a coup led by the Black Crest and their leader Selesh, who viewed the Federation as weak. But rather than engage with them, the Gorn began hostilities against the nearby Klingon Empire colonies with a human presence, such as Cestus III. The Black Crest killed the prior leadership of the hegemony, and it fell to Picard and Commander Data to prove the strength of the Federation by demonstrating their ingenuity and cooperation, which led the Black Crest to yield. However, the Alliance potential was severely weakened, but at least they had prevented the Gorn from enacting opportunistic raids on both the Federation and the Klingon Empire. This event took place just prior to the retaking of Deep Space Nine, and much of the Federation's fleet was tied up in this conflict or holding other key locations, so the Enterprise was pretty much on its own. A major battle did involve the Enterprise E, however. In 2374, the Battle of Betazed occurred after the Dominion had seized it earlier that year. They had constructed a station in orbit, Sentok Nor, which was their Jem'Hadar production facility and command outpost, as well as the location for experiments to create telepathic Jem'Hadar. The Enterprise responded to liberate the core Federation territory and deployed forces to the surface. During their attempts to free Betazed, Deanna Troi was among those deployed to bolster the resistance, where she eventually had to learn how to use their telepathic powers to kill the Jem'Hadar, but she kept this knowledge from her people. The damage to the planet had been rather severe for its 4-month occupation, but ultimately the Dominion presence was driven away when the Betazoids overwhelmed their minds with forced empathy, something they were not genetically bred to deal with. While this was going on, Beverly Crusher was working remotely alongside Starfleet Medical and Julian Bashir to devise a cure for a Dominion-engineered bioweapon using old research from Dr. Phlox. We had seen the Dominion use engineered plagues and the like in the past, so Starfleet Medical had to contend with this angle of the Founders' wartime efforts. By 2375, the Dominion War was at its height, with the Federation alliance now in full effect, but still Starfleet needed more allies on its side. This year saw the Evora become a protectorate of the Federation, despite their development of warp travel only a year earlier. This diplomatic mission was helmed by the Enterprise II, which then responded to an incident in the Briar Patch and culminated in the breakdown of sonar Starfleet operations. This was in Star Trek Insurrection, and although that film ends on a high note, with the Baku and local sonar reuniting, the sonar at large continued to produce Ketracel White for the Dominion. Towards the very end of the war, the Enterprise returned to Earth, and among its duties, it was there to oversee that year's Starfleet graduation. It was not present there all the time, and its absence coincided with the Breen attack on Earth, to which Captain Jean-Luc Picard was not exactly going to ignore. The tales of the Dominion War paints that Picard led the evacuation of Starfleet Academy, while Breen agents locked down the starbases to prevent the docked vessels from joining the battle overhead. This is what gave the Breen time to enact their attack on the heart of the Federation. Also compromised was Earth's own defence platforms, which were redirected to intercept any Federation vessel, and it fell to Picard too to undo the sabotage. Upon success, the Enterprise was able to free and join up with the local defence fleet and drive off the Breen strike. The Enterprise was not a part of the fleets that moved to assault Cardassia, however. But if I had to guess, I imagine it was remaining on defensive duties of the core Federation worlds in the closing hours of the war. So, as we can see, for the most part, the Enterprise E was deliberately kept away from the fighting, frankly to preserve its image and keep morale from declining. It was simply too valuable an asset to even risk in the mess of combat. We see a similar thing happen with another Enterprise in the Klingon War of 2256 and the removal of that vessel from the front lines, because it was to remain a symbol of the Federation's ideals of exploration and diplomacy, not open warfare, and Captain Pike and crew were given missions away from active combat to preserve these duties. These are only a couple of the missions and events mentioned in the shows, but expanded on in books, comics and games. There is plenty of room for more tales of the Enterprise during this time, but generally we can see that the vessel was still very active during the war, just assigned to diplomatic missions and maintaining peace among other worlds, while attempting to represent the Federation in recruiting allies. These roles are suited for the Enterprise, to be certain, and although the name may draw ire in battle with the Dominion, it would also be a sign that Starfleet was not altogether abandoning its other duties, although it would have been cool to see the Enterprise defend Earth in the Dominion War. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope I brought some light and entertainment to these tales. I've been Rick. Thanks again for watching, and goodbye.